Hi, I'm Katrina Shute, joining you today for On the Line here at Outside the Locker Room. Today, we were lucky enough to talk to world-renowned tennis coach Darren Cahill, former coach of champ Andre Agassi and current coach of world number 2 women's player Simona Halep. During the interview, Darren talks about key strategies for athletes struggling with self-belief and talks about assisting Simona in overcoming her own emotional demons to win a Grand Slam. And he also gives us an insight into how the players at the Port Adelaide Football Club are coping during the coronavirus pandemic and with the suspension of the season. Thanks for joining us. Hey Darren, thanks for joining us on the line at OTLR. How are you?
I'm very well, Katrina. Yourself?
Very well, thank you.
I missed our days from Vegas.
I know, the old Vegas days. It's been a while.
Yeah.
The last time I saw you in Vegas, you were lying on the couch with 2 knees, which had just been reconstructed.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I'm well and truly over those now. So back on the court, back into coaching. So I've got a new life thanks to a couple of new knees.
Excellent. Now, Darren, you're talking to us from your home in Adelaide when in a normal world, you would be right now preparing Simona for another Grand Slam French Open win at Roland Garros.
Hopefully, that would be the plan if that was the case. Of course, the clay court season is her best part of the year, and that's where she plays her best tennis. And that's where we've had kind of our best moments and our worst moments rolled into one. So they say the journey to the top is a bumpy road, and certainly for Simona it was a bumpy road, but a great one to eventually get that French Open title in 2018.
So the French Open's been postponed, they say, till September. Wimbledon, where Simona is the current reigning Wimbledon champ, has been cancelled. How's the team dealing with all that right now when she's really at her prime and everything's just been put on hold?
Yeah, it's a great question because there's no playbook for this at all, and we're all kind of working our way through this as best as possible. And I don't want to push the athlete too hard through these weeks because there's really no goal for them. Normally we have tournaments to build up for, and that's what the training's about. And you can prepare the training and the workload leading up to those tournaments. But with there being no tournaments in sight, and we don't know in tennis when we'll come back. We know with AFL and some local sports here in Australia, with things going so well, it's just around the corner. But for 160 countries to get rid of all the travel restrictions, we start tournaments up again. I don't see that happening too quickly. So for tennis to happen again in 2020, I'd be really surprised. So it's tough to keep that motivation and that focus and that purpose when you're not quite sure when tennis will start again. So as best we can, we're trying to keep it fun. We're trying to do some stuff off the court with Simona that she doesn't normally do, work on stuff in the gym that she doesn't normally have a chance to do, make it as interesting as possible for her. We're gauging all her statistics, what she's bench pressing, what her fat tests are, what the DEXA scans are, what her 1K time trials are, all that type of stuff that we can monitor. We're trying to slip a lot more of that type of training into a program. But you're right, it's just really tough to know what's around the corner because we feel like in our sport, we're a long way away from starting.
So for athletes, elite athletes across the board, really around the world, with the Olympics now being delayed by a year, could you give us a bit of an insight into the mind of an athlete when they're at their prime, they've prepared to peak at this time, and it all gets put on hold? What's it like for them?
It's their life. I think that you're dealing with something that we've dreamed about, and that's been our goal 24/7 since we were a little kid, and to play on the biggest stadiums in the world against the best players in the world as far as a tennis player is concerned, to see the French Open cancelled, to see Wimbledon cancelled, especially for Simona, that she's 28 years of age now. She doesn't wish to play forever. If she can play another 2, 3, 4 years, that would be great. So these are kind of missed opportunities for her. I've got to be honest, I'm really, really lucky that I'm working with somebody that's so grounded, and she's able to take everything into perspective, find the good in a bad situation, and be able to keep that focus and then go, okay, that's happening, that's not so great, let's find the positive and let's work in a different direction. A lot of tennis players are not like that. And so with tennis players, once tennis stopped and our whole world stopped. Income stopped for not just tennis players, but for all the tennis coaches, for all the physios, for all the support staff. Basically, everything came to a screaming halt within 1 week when Indian Wells was cancelled. We're lucky, and I'm lucky that I get to work with a great player. Simona's lucky that she's made great money, so this is not urgent for her. But tennis really only supports about 150 pro players in the entire world. So anybody ranked 150 or below, and we have some great players ranked 200, 300, 400 in the world, it's tough for those players. So mentally, to be in the situation that they're in has got to be a real test for them, and a test of their strength, their stamina, their mental capacity, not get too down on themselves during this situation. I know a lot of tennis players at the top are putting together a fund to try to help those lower ranked players to make sure we don't lose them in the system. It's a really difficult situation that tennis finds itself in. And as you probably heard over the last couple of weeks, tennis as a whole is talking about uniting and becoming one tour. And that's the Women's Tennis Association with the Men's Tennis Association. And I actually think that would be a great thing for our sport as a whole. So maybe some good can come out of this really bad situation, but it is tough for those lower ranked players, no question.
Why do you think it would be good?
Well, many reasons, because as you know, in the AFL, Gil McLaughlin is the CEO, so he's the one boss. In tennis, we have 7 bosses. So if you can imagine that, we have the ATP, the men's tour, the WTA, which is the women's tour. We have the ITF, so we have a CEO of the ITF, and the ITF looks after a lot of the junior tournaments, a lot of the smaller WTA tournaments, also the Davis Cup and the Federation Cup. And then we have the 4 Grand Slams, and the 4 Grand Slams run independently, and they basically set their own rules. So you have a boss of each of those Grand Slams. Here in Australia, it's Craig Tiley at Tennis Australia. So we have 7 heads of tennis, and you put those 7 people in one room and try to get progress made in the game of tennis. Because everybody's fighting for their own piece of pie, it's a difficult sport to make progress. And we have a lot of complications when it comes to prize money, our tours, the calendars, even the way we look after players, the way we look after coaches. So I think if we all got together and we formed one tour, then firstly, the men and the women together would form great unison when we walk into the Grand Slams, and they start to talk about things that mean a lot to them. And that's increases in prize money, increases to the pension plan, getting better schedules, new tournaments that come on, where they go on the slots. Also, the costs of running 2 tours is incredibly expensive. So all of a sudden you have one set of costs, which is consolidated. And I think tennis has been a leader in sport, worldwide sport, for years and years. And the fact that women's prize money is now pretty similar to what men's prize money is. And at many of the big tournaments, we pay equal prize money as well. And as we've seen, Serena Williams rates just as well as Rafa Nadal and Roger Federer, especially in the US. So we've come a long way in women's tennis, and that's a big thanks to people like Billie Jean King, Chris Evert, Martina Navratilova. And I think this is just a progression of all that great work. So one tour in tennis, I think would be a great thing.
Interesting. Hey, getting back to talking mental health and talking about player mental health, for some of our younger listeners, they may not be aware, you were actually a great tennis player in your own right, Darren. I think
you're my best friend now.
In 1988, you made the semi-final of the US Open. 1989, achieved a ranking of number 22 in the world.
Yep.
What was player mental health like back in the 80s, you know, the late 80s, early 90s? Was there the focus on it then than that there is now?
Pretty much non-existent. Yeah, I'm embarrassed to say that, but it wasn't. And back in those days, I come from a football family, as you know, with my dad being involved with the Port Adelaide Football Club. So my football philosophy was, back in the old days, no pain, no gain. If you have pain, you don't show your opponent, you don't show weakness. And mentally, that was there as well. So you pushed through those tough times and you didn't ask for help. You just didn't do it because it was hammered into us that that was a weakness. And you don't let your opponents. And in tennis, everybody was an opponent. I didn't have teammates as well. So everybody that I traveled with was basically an opponent. So you just don't show weakness. And we lost a lot of good players to the sport because of that, looking back. And I think times have changed a lot. And people are more open to talking about the issues that they have and dealing with those issues And we're seeing a lot more players now finding their way through some tough times and staying in sport and being willing to talk about the problems they have. Even with the players that I've looked after, I've had some issues with some of those players as well. And I'll try to help them as much as I can. But the one thing I'll do is that I'll make sure they talk to professionals that know what they're talking about. I have a lady called Alexis Castori across in the US that's helped a lot of my players. And she deals with not only the mindset and the mind frame that you have as an athlete in competing, whether it's with nerves or tightening up in tough situations, getting frustrated, losing your anger, letting matches go because you're being so disillusioned with what's been going on and you're feeling the pressure, but also life issues outside the court as well, because as we know, tennis means a lot to us, but it's not everything. And people are dealing with all sorts of issues all the time. So I'm there for my players all the time. I'll talk to them through those issues, but the moment it gets past my capacity, and I don't ever try to be an expert in those areas, I make sure that they seek real help. And you'll be surprised that a lot of tennis players, it's tough for me to put a number on it, but I would say in the top 100, I'd be guessing at least 50% of those players in the top 100 get extra help from a mental side of things. And that's not because they might be struggling with one thing in particular. They might be looking for an edge as well. But a lot of people are doing that now. But back in my day, no, that was rarely done at all.
So let's talk about some of those players that you have coached. I start off with Lleyton Hewitt, who won the US Open in 2001. Now, he was appeared to be a very good self-motivator on court with his famous come-ons and all that kind of stuff. Was that a way for him to really get his head in the right frame of mind for the game?
Lleyton was a special competitor, one out of the box. Basically, he was a raging bull, and all you had to do was open the gate, let him out of the cage, and on he'd go onto the court, and he would just take it down on his opponent. He was rare, and I think the only person that I would compare him to in tennis these days would be Rafael Nadal. Very, very similar. You never see Nadal give up for a single point. Every time he steps onto the court, he feels like he can win a match, and he gives 100%. No matter if he's down 6-love, 5-love, he'll be still trying for that point no matter what. And that's what Lleyton Hewitt was all about. I think one of the big things with Lleyton, and it's a little bit different to most people because I couldn't do what Lleyton would do, is that if his life outside of the tennis court was a bit of a mess, if there was stuff going on, he had the ability to find a safe haven within the lines. So there could be World War III happening outside the tennis court, but as soon as he stepped onto the tennis court, that was his home. And he was able to concentrate and put all of that focus to winning one tennis match and making it against a single opponent. Now, if I was fighting with a girlfriend or having an argument with the ATP, I couldn't go out there and play. I couldn't compete. Andre Agassi was the same. He couldn't do that. His life had to be tight outside the lines, and then inside the lines, he could play his best tennis. So I thought that was really interesting with Lleyton, is that he had the mental ability to put everything aside and use it as motivation to win a tennis match, which is pretty unique.
Yeah, that's amazing. Talking about Andre, his 2009 book, Open, he really detailed his struggles with depression and mental health. Were you aware of all that when you took on coaching him? I think 2002 you took on coaching.
Yeah, exactly. So he kind of got through all that before I came along. So he was about 32 years of age before I even started with him. So I got him at a good place in his life. He just married Steffi Graf. They just had Jaden, their first son. So a lot of the tough stuff was with his former coach, Brad Gilbert. And Andre talks about it all the time. It was a journey for him. And as he talks about in the book, he never really loved the game from a young age. He got into sport and he got into tennis pretty much because his dad had this dream. And with all of the kids, Andre was the fourth of the kids. And Mr. Agassi, Mike Agassi, tried to make all of his sons and daughters tennis players. And it got to Andre, and Andre was the youngest, and it was like the last-ditch effort. And it was remarkable that Andre turned out the way he did. But he was on the court not so much for the love of the game, because that's what he thought he was supposed to do. And that's what he struggles a lot with in the book, is that he never found the balance between what it feels like to win compared to what it feels like to lose. Losing to him, he suffered a lot. And then when he actually won tennis matches, he never got the equal enjoyment out of winning. So that was the balance that he really suffered with until I believe he married Steph. And then when he married Steph, it kind of made sense of what he was doing in the journey. And he actually found real purpose. I talk a lot about no matter what sport you're playing in, or it could be in a work environment as well, is that you have to find the purpose, the real purpose to turn up to work every day, to get the love of it out of it. And with Andre, when I came along, his purpose was to create an education for children in Las Vegas, especially, that couldn't afford an education. And that's why he played. That's why he got onto the court. That's why he worked hard, because he would go to those schools. He just, as you know, he just made the Andre Agassi Preparatory Academy. And I think back then it was classes 3, 4, 5, and 6. So it hadn't gone all the way up to year 12. The school had just started, but we would go to the school and we'd tour around the school, and the kids would be coming up and giving him hugs and smiles on the faces. And these are kids that normally would be in the streets. They couldn't afford an education. So that was his purpose. That's why he trained. That's why he played. And that's why he looked down the other side of the court and said, "You're not going to beat me today, because the purpose for I'm playing is much bigger than what you're playing for." So I reckon that's really important for any athlete. Is there are many other things that make a great athlete, but having real purpose makes a big difference.
Mm. Do you think the book Open really, because he was so honest and literally open with every aspect of his life, do you think that it really gave the opportunity for other athletes to perhaps come out and be a little more honest with their struggles?
You're saying it's too good, his book?
No, it was amazing. I
Yeah.
vaguely remember you being described as the good-looking Aussie with a big smile. So you should
That
have
might be the only truthful thing in the whole book, right? No, he left some really good. He could write 3 books, honestly. Some of the stories he's told me over the years are remarkable, and he left a lot of great stories out of there. And if he ever wants to write another book, he could fill that up, no problems. And no, I don't think so, because he had a person that helped him with the book called J.R. Mowringer, and J.R. was a Pulitzer Prize winner as well. And together, they spent a year together talking about stories and pulling this book together. And the way it was written made it an easy read. It kind of takes you on the journey with him as well, without being too complicated. JR's got a memoir of his own life as well, and his is a good read. I think it's called The Tender Bar, if anyone wants to read it. It's a great book. And he also did the Nike Bosses book as well. So he got the right person to help him write the book. And I reckon part of the reason, or the biggest part of the reason for him doing it, was that he didn't want people to suffer the way he did. And he wanted to change somebody's life. And he always says, if he can change one person's life through reading that book and make them understand that when they're going through that journey of having some mental health problems or dealing with drugs, and they're feeling like there's no way out and there's no one to turn to, other people have done it. And other people have found their way out. And that was what he wanted to convey in that book. So hopefully he did do it. I thought it was an incredible read. I thought the fact that he was so open made it that way. And I would hope it's the other way. I would hope that it would encourage more people to do it if they can.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, moving on to Simona. Now, she had her own struggles. Very talented player, very hardworking, but apparently was struggling with a bit of a lack of self-belief, controlling her emotions on court. How were you able to turn that around for her? I mean, I'm sure it's a long and lengthy process, but you've been described as a national hero in Romania for being able to do that for her. So,
look, she was already a great player before I started with her. I think she was 4 in the world when I went to the first tournament with her at Indian Wells. And one of the things with coaching, and I don't think it's any different to being a CEO or coaching team sports, is that it takes time. And you have to earn that trust and build that culture over time. And one of the most important things is to ask questions. We as tennis coaches sometimes come in and coach players the way we see the game. And it's the biggest mistake a tennis coach can make, is that you have to coach tennis players through their eyes, not through my eyes. So you can't just walk in there and know instantly what my player is thinking. You have to ask questions, get them to answer, put them in scenarios, and then work out why they're making certain decisions they are, why they're getting frustrated in those moments. And then you can make some changes. So I reckon, a good 6 months before I started to really understand the way Simona played, why her personality was what it was on the court. And I still made mistakes. There was a great example of, and you've always heard people say that great leadership builds great culture, which brings success. I actually think it's the other way around. I think you have to deal with the culture side before you can deal with the leadership side. And I made a big mistake in the French Open in 2017. I'm not sure if you remember, but she lost to Jelena Ostapenko in the final of the French Open. And remember, this is a girl that's about 5'5.5" from Constanța in Romania. It's about 20 million people. The pressure that she was under, only because everybody wanted her to succeed, and tennis is the #1 sport over there. So she could feel that pressure. And part of my job was to try to insulate her a little bit, put the walls up around our team. And so she didn't feel that outside pressure. When she lost that final at the French Open, she was up a set in the break, and then she was up a break in the third. After that match was maybe the toughest time that we've ever had, in the sense that a lot of tears, a lot of talking, and she really believed that that might be it. She's just lost her best chance to ever win a Grand Slam. She's never going to get that opportunity again. I let it slip through my fingers. I'm never going to be able to sleep again. This is going to haunt me for the rest of my life. What I tried to do, and always with the best intentions, was to try to lead her through that period with strong leadership. And what I didn't realize I was doing was I didn't have great empathy to the pressure and the struggles and the disappointment that she was going through. I tried to get her back on the horse as fast as possible. That particular match was for her first ever Grand Slam, and also for the #1 ranking in the world. And as the weeks went along, she made it through to the semifinals in Canada. She gave up in the semis in that match. She made it through to the finals in Cincinnati, again playing for the #1 ranking in the world. She gave up in that match. She lost to Garbine Muguruza 6-1, 6-love. And I was being pretty tough on her after those matches for the lack of effort. I never worry about the result, because the result, I think, is always a byproduct of, give me the effort, the result will take care of itself. But if you don't give me the effort, then I'm going to be upset with the process. At one stage, her physio walked past me and pulled me aside and said, "Darren, I think you're pushing a bit hard here," because most people didn't think she was ever going to be a great tennis player. Most people had written her off. She was too small. She's from a little town in Constanța. She's living her dream. She's already a top 5 player in the world. She has a chance to win a Grand Slam. She has a chance to be #1 in the world. I reckon it'd be good if all of us just put our arms around her at some point, tell her that we love her, and tell her we're really proud of her. So I took those words in, and this is just off the back of her giving up in the final of a big tournament. And I'm going, I get it, but no, this is about effort. This is about trying as hard as you possibly can, no matter what the result. So I wasn't listening to what was happening with inside my team. I was ruining the culture between Simona, the physio, the trainer, myself, and we got the manager. We've got a tennis team is like a minibus. We've got 8 or 9 people that travel around to all the tournaments. Yeah. We get to the US Open. She draws Maria Sharapova in the first round. Massive match. She tries hard but doesn't play well and loses in the first round. And after the match, I remember this like it was yesterday, she came out to the little players area where we were, and I patted her on the leg. I said, "Listen, you tried hard, no problems, all I ask." And then she said, "Well, how do you think I played tactically?" And what I should have done is bit my tongue and said, "We'll talk about that another day." But I started to go into where I thought that she let herself down tactically. Again, not showing empathy for what she was going through, being a coach. All I'm doing is thinking about how I can make this girl better. And I wasn't showing any empathy. Halfway through my conversation, she got up, walked away. I could see that she was starting to cry a little bit. And the physio who pulled me aside a couple of weeks before walks past me going like this. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, this is all me. I've actually messed up this whole situation. So I went to the locker room, I knocked on the door, pulled her out, gave her a hug, told her that I loved her, told her that this is all me the last 8 or 10 weeks. I didn't realize what I was doing. I wanted this so badly for you that I was actually, in fact, putting more pressure on you. Not only were the 20 million Romanians wanting you to do this, but you could feel that pressure also coming from me. And I've messed up and I need to reset. So if you'll take this apology, I'll get better through this moment and we'll start again. Gave her a hug, All good. Pressure, it was like a valve being released within our team. The pressure comes off. 2 weeks later, she goes off to Beijing in China and beats Maria 6-2, 6-2, grabs the #1 ranking in the world. And then about 11 months after that, she wins the French Open in 2018. So as you know, I've been in this coaching game 30 years or so, and I've been lucky enough to coach some great players, but I still make mistakes. And you always have to try to learn from them and to try to get better. It's impossible. If you're not making mistakes, you're not trying hard enough and you're not trying to get better. So I think no matter what level you're at, you're going to make some mistakes, but you just need to make sure you don't make them twice.
So that experience has changed your coaching style moving ahead?
Yeah, for sure. I think that we talk a lot about IQ, tennis IQ in tennis, but it's the EQ, the emotional quality that we have to be more intact with, especially in tennis. I'm not sure about other sports, but in tennis, because the pressures are so big, not so even from a perception of winning tennis matches every single week, but also a financial pressure as well, because players don't know what they're going to make every week, and that they don't know that they're on a contract for a couple of years making $300,000 or $400,000. They live by their paycheck every week. So the pressures the players are under, I kind of always took it for granted because that was my life. That was what I lived. I understood that it was normal for me, but not everybody deals with it like that. So communication is huge. The more you talk to your player, the more you get to understand your player, the more you can help your player.
So what would you say to athletes, established athletes, up and coming athletes now, who might be feeling like their mental health is taking a toll on their game, that they could be a better player if they were in a better place mentally?
I think you need to find somebody you can trust and that you can talk to, that will not judge you, whether that be a professional in that area or it could be just be a friend as well. But I think it's one thing talking about it, but you also have to be prepared to act on it as well. And I think that's really important as well. The moment you decide to talk about it is the first step. And then after that, it has to become a part of your life. Simona had some help as well, only because I couldn't get to the bottom of why she would head to the exit door in some of the matches. She'd be so frustrated inside and wanted to win so badly that if it didn't go her way, if she was in a winning opportunity and leading in a tennis match, and then it kind of went against her, she would start to get down on herself so badly that she would try, but emotionally she'd be so flat that the match would get away from her. So I tried to fix that and I couldn't get to the bottom of it. So we brought in help. Now, Simona taking that help because I want it is one thing, but she had to want it. And it had to come from her. It's one thing for a coach saying, you need to speak to this person because I really believe you need this person to help you get to the next level. And the player's going to sit back there going, well, I don't really have a problem. Well, why should I speak to that person? So we kind of went through that stage at the start until at one point we had a little bit of a separation there for about 5 or 6 weeks where I couldn't help her and I felt like I was getting in the way. So I think a coach at some point always has to go, I'm always here for the best interest of the player if I'm her coach. And if I'm not helping you, then I'll help you get somebody that will help you get to that point. And I did that. I left her for 5 or 6 weeks. I said that you probably need a different voice and a different coach. Or you can think about what we've been talking about and decide whether or not you want me to come back and we can get somebody else in to help. And so when I did do that, she go, you know what? I actually need this. I've had a good chance to think about it. I need to speak to somebody. She spoke to Alexis, and Alexis has been with her for about 3 years now. I'm not sure how much they talk, but it's between them. Alexis never comes back to me and tells me what they're speaking about, but I can see it in her attitude and her results and the way she's going about her work. So all that being good, it's working beautifully.
Excellent. Well, hopefully it all comes to fruition when and if tennis continues this year, but certainly next year. Hey, while I've got you here, you're also appointed to the board of the Port Adelaide Football Club 2018. How's the mental health of the players at Alberton at the moment during this pandemic and the suspension of the season?
Yeah, we have a great board member, Holly Ransom. I'm not sure if you've heard of Holly, but she's done a remarkable job with making sure that we're taking care of the this part, because again, it's like tennis players, footballers are experiencing something that we've never experienced before. And so for the most part, I think the footballers are getting a chance to spend more time at home. They know that Australia is coming out of this COVID-19 thing a little bit sooner than other countries, so they can see that green light, that purpose that I always talk about as well. And I think over the next 5 or 6 weeks, they have a chance to get into training and actually get back onto the ovals and start playing again. So I think for the most part, the players have handled it really well. I know from a club perspective, we want the players, if they have troubles, to come and talk to us, to talk to the coach, to talk to the representative that we have there that helps with this sort of stuff, to pull a board member aside and tell them what they're struggling with, because we can help everybody now. And it should not be seen as a sign of weakness. It should be seen as a way to get better and to improve yourself. And I know that being John Cahill's son back in the 70s and 80s and growing up in his shadow, I suffered a lot inside trying to jump outside of his shadow as well. And if I had people to talk about it more, maybe would have done a better job dealing with those pressures and staying in the game longer than I did and making some rash decisions that I did. We all get better second time over, but it's important for the players these days to make sure that if something's troubling them, if they do have an issue, if they're worried about something, to come and talk to somebody at the club. And we have a great setup there through Holly and through everybody in that football department that will be able to help them.
Excellent. Well, wishing the boys all the best of luck for the...
Oh, don't lie, because you're a Crows lady, right?
Well, I like to think of myself as a proud South Aussie. So, but no, look, honestly, let's hope we see some footy coming up in the second half of the year. Thank you so much for joining us today, Darren, for your expertise and experience. I'm sure that's great advice for so many people out there. And good luck with the rest of the season with Simona, come what may.
My pleasure, Katrina. All the best.
Great talking to you. Bye. So there you have it. Thanks for joining us on the line here at Outside the Locker Room. For more information, jump onto our website, otlr.org.au.